As Fred said, I represent at Grandlabs. We're a global security software vendor in the data discovery. We're very excited to be here in Germany, partnering with Twinsoft. We've decided to make that strategic decision based on Twinsoft's experience in the security arena and all the expertise that they bring from project management, both on a hardware, software and a consultancy point of view. What I'm going to do for the next few minutes is take you through what we see as a best practice for GDPR implementation. So as we know, the legislation is going to change and become effective from May next year. And what we want to do here is just take you through a sample of what we're seeing as best practice by business preparing for GDPR or DSGVO as we know in Germany. A little bit about our organization. We're a global player, as I mentioned. I lead our sales organization from our European headquarters in Dublin. We're operational out of our HQ in Singapore, and then we've got a North American entity both in Los Angeles, New York, and in Austin, Texas. Obviously, the new change in legislation, the EU data protection legislation, is going to have a very significant impact on the way the businesses manage data throughout the next coming years. And we've certainly seen with the new EU legislation three key areas within that legislation that organisations that we're talking to throughout Europe are very concerned about. These are the reporting directives now, which mean that you need to report a breach within 72 hours. The subject access request, where a citizen or an individual has the right to find the amount of data that you hold on them as an individual within the 30-day period. And also the right to be forgotten once I have decided that you have shared the data that you hold on me, and now I have the right for you to remove that data from your infrastructure and share it with me. We're seeing at the moment that the new EU legislation, DSGVO, in terms of structure like PCI compliance, where organisations who are using e-commerce or digital trading methodologies where they take credit card holder data at the moment, this is a very significant change to the way that that has been very much a de-scoped and a limited capability for certification purposes. And we basically see that GDPR goes a lot further than your PCI structure today. One of the things that I thought we would share with you today in terms of how a best practice for implementing the strategy for GDPR is going to look is going to be based on the elements within your organisation where we see risk and where we see a best practice. Over the last 2 years, we've basically seen that there's a significant amount, almost a third of data breaches are still accruing from your staff. So with the hackers, with poor implementation of security business, we still see that today 30% of hacks of breaches in the business come from your staff. So that represents an opportunity and also represents a threat. I think one of the significant things which GDPR calls out, and if you look at some of the significant data breaches that we've got here that have been very, very significant in the last number of months, have been in particular that they are stealing PII. So your traditional methodology of stealing credit cards and looking for that particular gold treasure in your organisation has changed fundamentally. What we see today, if you look at some of the very significant volume-based hacks in the last 2 years, have been stealing PII. They've been stealing your own identity, either usernames or passwords. They've been stealing your email address. So we already see that in the market, the criminals are changing the methodology of engagement, and they're not just going after credit card data any longer. And as you can see from the volume of data that's been stolen, it's significantly changed to PII. And within that, you can clearly see that the fines that are coming down the line for everybody in the EU are going to be 4% of global turnover, or 20 million. And this means that we have seen a very significant sea change in organisation. They're very concerned about brand damage, they're very concerned about their customer retention, their share price, their investor relationships. So this significant change in the way data is now being attacked, the type of data that businesses are losing, and the volume of data that they're losing also means this is a very significant change. Where we see organisations today losing data is no longer in the traditional environments where you would think the data is only sitting, which was typically in your data storage environment, in your typical traditional storage environment. We're seeing that when we scan throughout the environments that we work in, we're finding sensitive data in memory, we're finding sensitive data in areas such as deleted files. So where somebody has emptied the recycling bin, they believe it's gone, but it's not gone. And we're also finding significant volumes of data in things like shadow files, which are temporary, and shadow volumes where there is significant amount of data that we're finding. I think we're also finding that within the traditional server and database platform environment, we're finding significant volumes in backed up file servers, in email platforms in particular, archived email. Some organisations over the last number of years have had a very simple policy that when a member of staff leaves, we archive their email. We don't take the time to do a due diligence and look in the environment to see if there's sensitive data. We have a policy to archive. And typically in the larger organisations, when you go back over 24 months, 36 months and 60 months, in some organisations that's a significant amount of risk data that has been archived without any real diligence around what you hold. So under GDPR, we're also seeing that a significant amount of organisations are going back into email and email archive to make sure that there are no skeletons in the dustbin. One of the growth areas that we have seen across Europe in particular has been the explosion of cloud storage. Very commoditized, very easy to deploy, and very easy to use, which makes it a very, very hackable environment for criminals to get into. But we certainly see here in Europe, off the back of Office 365 growth on email, we see the Windows Azure business very, very strong. We see Amazon's S3 services, but we also see things like Box and Dropbox have been a growth area where people now are using this commodity storage environment for quick and easy deployment. We also can see that SharePoint and OneDrive are other valuable asset areas where there is business that has got sensitive data within those environments. And we see that organizations now are very, very concerned about what's going up into their cloud environment. A couple of things that I think we want to talk about here as a best practice for the business. I think I just touched on that we have found sensitive data, both for PII and for credit card data, right across your organization. This isn't just confirmed to your storage environment. This is no longer the typical place where you would expect to find sensitive data, particularly if you're looking for credit card data. This is now a multi-department problem as we move towards the arena of GDPR. Businesses are facing this. And we think in the experience that we've had working with organizations across Europe, that no one person or one department is going to be able to fix the GDPR solution and manage what we're hearing from a lot of businesses around Europe as a data tsunami waiting to happen once we start to get into the GDPR environment. I think underpinning that is that we have seen right across the world right now a very significant shortage of skilled expertise in people who have got a very significant handle on the security of the whole security business. There are at the moment somewhere in the region of 4 million vacancies in security, so if you've got family or friends who want to get into IT, now is a great time to get into security. But that's why we partner with people like Twinsoft, because there is such a dearth and there is such a gap of knowledge and experience managing a holistic security environment across the business today. And that's why partners like Twinsoft can help when we work together to look at the end-to-end solution that you are going to need when you start your journey for GDPR preparation. I think, as I mentioned at the outset, looking at a best practice to help you through the GDPR, your staff still represent a risk to your business, but they also represent a very significant opportunity to help preparing you for the GDPR initiative. We've seen all too often when you talk to security and talk to security professionals, when we talk to CTOs and we talk to IT directors globally, they never have enough time. They're always under-resourced. They always have a very heavy schedule of work that they are going to deploy. And now we've got GDPR that's going to be put into this work stream, and you've got to find time to assess my data risk, find the data, and then remediate that data in an environment which is compliant, in line with legislation, and more importantly, easy for you as an organisation to access, because under GDPR, with things like the right to be forgotten, subject access requests and reporting in 72 hours, your data set needs to be very accessible to provide you with access to these things which are going to come. So we see today that the best practice that we're seeing for businesses preparing for GDPR is not that this is going to reside with the IT. The IT department won't be able to make a fluid decision about marketing data, finance data, facilities data, customer service data, call center data. The IT department don't have the bandwidth or the experience to be able to make those data calls. So one of the things that we have seen as a typical fall here is these two ugly guys, where the business has gone back and said, "Oh, sorry guys, IT needs to do better. Yes, I want the IT to do more with less." And that's a story that we've heard right across Europe for the last 6 months. We should really do more with the assets that we have. This isn't going to work from what we see talking to medium-sized, small and large companies who are trying to prepare and get ready for GDPR. One department cannot fix this problem, and the best practice that we see I'll share with you now. I think one of the things that we have seen is where an organisation is going to look at the stakeholders within all the data assets that they have in the business, our marketing team, the customer service team, the sales team, the accounts team, the finance team. Wherever in your organisation you have data that could be deemed under GDPR to be an asset, you need to engage a stakeholder to come from that department to make an intelligent opinion about the data that you find. And so we see as best practice for companies that we're talking to right through Europe at the moment who are preparing for GDPR, that they are looking to engage across the business, and this is looking to be more of a strategic company-wide engagement. I think sharing that responsibility means that you have got more resources, which, as I talked about a moment ago, means that certainly for the IT team, they don't have the resource. So sharing that responsibility across your business means that you have more effectiveness and you've got more capability in looking at the data. I think one of the challenges is within all of the organisations that we see is that you understand who your audience is within the company that you're working with. Who in marketing, who in sales, who in customer service, who in the call centre do you need to address as the stakeholder for the data, and make sure that they understand the message and the importance. Because as I mentioned earlier, certainly you've got to look at the custodians of this data being right across your business. IT is not going to be able to cope with this. And one of the best practices that we see at the moment are businesses that are working with an advisory council. They're setting up cross-functional teams within their organisation that are getting prepared for when they find the data to make an assessment on how that data works. So you see teams like this that are being set up right across Europe, working in organisations where the data center manager, the call center manager, the customer service manager, the head of sales, somebody from finance, somebody from accounting are getting together to sit down to identify what is sensitive data and what under GDPR is important to those guys. So they are going to be making the decision around whether we delete this information, whether we retain the information, what is sensitive, what do we not need to hold, and then feeding that back into what we see as a wider governance strategy, where organisations today are setting up governance teams to look at GDPR. Because governance at the end of the day is really what GDPR is all about. It's about being compliant. In the event of a breach, you need to display to the regulator, I have put mechanisms in place, I've got a policy to show best practice for due diligence around the data that we have, and I've shown that I've made a best effort to protect that data asset with the team that I have. And certainly from what we see at the moment, having a team that works across your organisation, reporting into a data governance environment, either from finance or from legal, is the best way to go in terms of preparing for GDPR. So I think in summary, what we're seeing here is that the businesses, GDPR, certainly talking to all sorts of organisations right across Europe, is a very significant concern. Two questions we are asked all the time: can you find the data? And the second question is, what do I do when I find the data? And I think the takeaway from this today is that certainly for all organisations we deal with, you cannot do this alone. You do not have the capability within your own resource to manage this by one department. And we certainly see that using a company-wide strategy, engaging stakeholders in each of the key departments where data resides in your organisation is a best practice that means as an ongoing business as usual solution, you get wider traction. This becomes a normal activity for the teams and the leaders within the segments of the business that you work, and therefore it becomes part of their daily routine, it becomes part of the operational function that they have, and it results in being more effective, and it gives you a better resource management tool with the team that you already have and the team that you're already paying for.